So this is the oldest sampler that I own. I think so at least, they're not all dated. This is by Mary Baigent. She was aged 11 years when she stitched this in 1829. Mary has a message for us. She tells us that children, like young twigs, may be bent any way. Therefore, all such who have the care of them should instill into their minds early notions of piety and virtue, as they naturally will grow as they are fashioned. And then she continues, all you, my friends, who now expect to see a piece of work thus performed by me, cast but a smile on this my mean endeavour. I'll strive to mend and be obedient ever. Her letters are not, I would say, hugely consistent. She's stitching on very, very tiny fabric. I think this is probably 40 count. I don't know, I haven't measured it. It's very tiny. And yes, you can definitely see differences. There are H's of different sizes. T's are typically half-size letters matching the sort of E and the I rather than the H. But one here that looks even shorter than normal. This L that doesn't look particularly long either. Some of her capital letters are sort of more elaborate than others. She has some punctuation in there. Again, some of it seems more in scale than others, and some of it more missing than others. This where she's put her name and age and so on, it's not wholly centrally aligned. There's that big gap between Mary and Baigent. You know, you wonder if maybe she was supposed to have an initial there, but it never made it into the thing. This was definitely a finished sampler, even though there is quite a lot of blank space in it. You can see how she's made the motif symmetrical. She's reversed these little trees at the bottom and the dogs. I cannot emphasize enough how tiny this stitching is. I mean, it's a good job she did it when she was 11, because at my age, you would have no hope unless you had substantial magnifying and lighting. For a sampler that is nearly 200 years old, it's not surprising that it shows some damage. So it's been in this frame for a long time. I'll show you the back in a minute. But you can see even under the frame, there's damage along the borders, but also damage down the sides of the main section as well. I'm not going to attempt to mend that. I don't think my skills are up to it. But it is sad. It is, at the moment it lives inside a cupboard. It's not getting any extra sunlight on it. And I'm not brave enough to take it out of this frame. I slightly feel it might all fall apart. It looks quite fragile. So there we are. It's got several borders. It's got this zigzag border with these leaves cross-stitched into it. It's got this, which is just a straight stitch zigzag border that I think looks really smart around the edges of the main section. Then it's got 3 times this same sort of leafy, leaves and buds maybe border. You can definitely see one of them is in a different colourway, and I wonder if when it was first done, all 3 repeats of that were in different colourways. I don't know, but I suspect that might have been the case. I'd love to know how bright the colours of this were, and I must admit that's the thing that's most likely to persuade me to take a look behind the frame, is just to see on the back how bright this was and what some of these colours originally were. I do love the little motifs, the little dogs and birds and trees and so on. Well, let's have a look on the back. And you'll see this is identified on the back. Walter Lucas, the gift of his mother, reclaimed and mounted December 21st, 1881. So that is 52 years after it was first stitched. And my guess is that this means that Walter Lucas was the son of Mary Baigent. I haven't tried to look that up and find out, but I suspect that's right, that he's reclaimed his mother's sampler and had it mounted in 1881, So that's 140 years ago. That's how old the framing is. Obviously the sampler significantly older than that. And then this label down here, found in 1969 and given to Marjorie Elston by her son Jeremy on the 14th of April 1970, returned to Jeremy Elston 16th January 1982. So Jeremy Elston is the father of my friend, and Jeremy has kept this obviously for many years. He originally bought it and gave it to his mother, who was a great needlewoman, and in fact I've got some of her work to show you in a minute. So he then had it after it was returned to him, and then there was nobody obvious, I think, within their family who really loved and wanted the sampler, and so my friend said, well, Ros, would you like it, and would you look after it? And so that's how it came to be in my possession, and I'm very grateful for it, and I treasure it very much. So that is Mary Baigent, 1829. Since we've been talking about the Elstons, I'm going to move on to this piece of work. Now this was sewn by, I think this is right, Marjorie Elston, who for whom that previous sampler was bought. Obviously it's a very different kind of sampler. This is, I should have measured this. I'm going to say 7 count. I don't even know what sort of fabric this is. It feels very hefty. She did a lot of needlework, I know, for churches, kneelers and I think altar fronts and I don't know, all kinds of stuff. So this is the kind of fabric that you might well use to stitch a kneeler on. That's going to get a lot of hard wear in a church. And she's used this piece as a sampler to show off different stitches that one could use. So starting up in the top right, a simple cross stitch design, and you can see on the back, I sort of like this on the back. It's not as neat and even as you might expect. This next one is called double Italian cross stitch, and you can see it creates this kind of cross with a square outline. That uses a bit more thread on the back. She's done this with a single thread and also to show it with a double thread, and obviously that will give you a much sturdier, more long-lasting effect. Long leg stitch, I really like this. It's a form of cross stitch, but you are crossing over 2 squares in one direction and 1 in the other. So you get a longer, is that right? Or even 2 squares in both directions and then alternating. I think that's right, actually. But you get sort of a woven effect almost. And again, she's done this, I think this is 2 threads over 2, 1 thread over 2, 2 threads over 4. And you can see on the back that uses very much less thread than standard cross stitch. Rice stitch, so here I think you make 1 large cross and then you almost like couching down, you do smaller crosses over the 4 corners of your cross. She's given us some here with 2 threads over 2 in sort of single colour blocks, and then this is a really lovely effect where you do the underline crosses in 1 colour and then the outline sections going over the top in a different colour. Finally, at the bottom of this column, the Jorda's knot. I love a Jorda's knot. In fact, I love any kind of tufted needlework. I just think it's magical, and I can't help rubbing my fingers through this when she's done it. And you can see that uses very little on the back, and all the yarn is there on the front. Forgot to mention the first of these edging stitches. That's a plait edge. I'm not sure exactly how she's done that. At the bottom we've got this flat plait that she stitched, and I think these are, I'm not sure, I think these might be the long cross stitches done 3 times over in alternating directions, I think, but I could be wrong. Above that, this knotted stitch, I don't know how that's done. I would need to look that up. I don't think I've done that before. It might just be this long sort of upright diagonal with a shorter little cross over the middle. Maybe there's more to it, I'm not sure. Again in 2 threads and in 1. Then the Surrey knots. I mean, this, if the Jorda's knot was lovely, this is glorious. I mean, this is like a carpet, and you can see, I'm just going to try and pull the stitch away, and you can see how deep she's left those tufts, almost twice as much as on the Jorda's knots, and it just it feels wonderful. That does use more yarn on the back, but it's worth it. Then we've got, she hasn't got as far as labelling it, but on this edge there's some buttonhole stitch, thicker one and longer stitches with 2 threads, and then 1 thread with a shorter stitch. The Montenegrin stitch, not dissimilar to the double Italian cross, but without the sort of horizontal stitches as well. Single thread, double thread. And finally sumac. I think this is so pretty. It's almost got the look of knitting to it. This is sort of on the horizontal. But these are just diagonal stitches in alternate directions in the rows, and she's done some lovely colour work on that. Now you can see there is space where I imagine she was planning several more stitches, possibly down the middle and certainly here at the top. She's not finished this top edge properly. She's just herringbone stitched it down while she was working. And I imagine she was also planning to continue the different edging stitches up the sides. And so this would then be something that she could refer to, but also refer other people to as they were designing and planning. I imagine particularly kneelers and those sorts of things. The different stitches that you could use, the effects that they get, what you might put as a border, how they work with different colours and different strands and thickness of yarn. So I really love that. And again, I'm really grateful that they trusted me to take those family things and care for them. I have 2 other samplers, and these are samplers that I purchased much more recently. I was really intrigued by this idea of working on unfinished samplers, and I found these 2, I think on Etsy, but it might have been eBay. One is very obviously unfinished, and one is much more nearly finished. Let's look at Carmen first of all. Carmen almost finished hers. Carmen M. Luche was 9 years old when she stitched this square. It's all alphabets and numbers and borders. So there's a capital alphabet at the top in cross stitch, followed by some numbers from 1 to 26. There's another cross stitch alphabet, very simple cross stitch alphabet for lowercase letters. Interesting thing to note there is this 2 different S's. Then this next row, this is a capital alphabet, but not in cross stitch. Here she's outlined each square of the letter with a thread. It gives a very delicate, very pretty effect. And then that continues on the next row. And then we've got some more numbers, again, in this sort of outline stitch. It's quite hard to tell because where they've faded, some of them are very similar colour to the background, but you can see it clearly here on the 10. Somebody seems to have stitched over that 10 with X's. I don't know whether that was Carmen. My guess is somebody much later. I think Carmen knew what she was doing. Then we have another capital alphabet, and this time these are, oh, it's some kind of I stitch. Is that an Algerian cross maybe? Somebody will tell me. And again, that's super pretty. That's a whole alphabet there. And then once again, some numbers after that, with this time just numbers 1 to 6. And then between each section, there's a different decorative border. Some in cross stitch, some in these eyelet stitches. Oh, and I'm just looking at this bottom. No, it is just a pattern. I thought that was another alphabet, but it's not. It's just another pattern. Now, what you will see on Carmen's sampler at the bottom is just this one section with no stitching. It's really densely packed with stitching. Her sampler, it's pretty small. It's, I don't think it's even a foot wide and long. I think it might be about 11 inches square. Neatly hemmed on every side, and just this one little section at the bottom. And I think that's where it's unfinished, because what it actually says is Carmen M. Luche, aged 9, YEA. Now, if she's just abbreviating it, I would expect her to say YRS, years. I think she was planning to finish that, say, years, and then possibly give a date or a location or both. But as I say, it is almost finished, and I think it would be a really lovely one to stitch up. If there's any that I'm going to chart and do, it would be this one. I think lots of people would really enjoy her lettering, her use of different kinds of stitches, the decorative borders, and then really nice space here at the bottom for you to put in your own name and date and location if you wanted to. So that's Carmen's. You can see it's not got any holes in as far as I can see Carmen's. The fabric is holding up really quite well. It is very faded, and there are these stains, particularly along this side. I don't know what the stains are from. This is how it came when I bought it. There's a little bit of stitch work coming away in one or two places, but almost all the threads are still in pretty good condition, and you can see there the back of her work was much neater than mine ever is. So that's Carmen. And then we have an unnamed sampler. And it's so interesting to me. So this is a bit larger than Carmen's. I think this is maybe 13, 14 inches deep and 16 inches wide, something like that. I don't think it's 18 inches. I'd say 16 inches wide. I will get a tape measure and actually put measurements of all of these in the description box below. This is not quite as fine. Neither of these are as fine as the fabric that Mary Baigent was using, nothing like. And both of these are on a kind of even weave-ish linen. So we've got a nice decorative alphabet across the middle, finished off here with an ampersand, and then something I'm not quite sure what that is. It looks like a lowercase y, but I'm not sure quite why that would be there. So I don't quite know what that is. And then we've got a border going all the way around, and it's quite a nice border because it's not repetitive. It's got some leaves, it's got some flowers, it's got some birds, and it's got up in this corner a couple of dogs. I don't know why. But that's the dogs, that's where they are. At the bottom we've got some trees, a sort of basket of maybe flowers, tree with some birds in, tree with a, I don't know, scared looking cat or deer, something like that. There's more animals here. Again, lots of this is faded to be very close in colour to the background fabric. Really lovely house with a tiara, house with a crown. I mean, I think all houses need crowns. So probably maybe that's a castle or a palace. There's a little bird right down in the corner. And then my very favourite thing on this middle row, so you should have another border above the alphabet, more baskets of flowers, and then just some legs popping out under a skirt, some legs and feet. So we know that she obviously intended there to be a person or people there. There's a lot of blank space on this. It's very, very clearly unfinished. I wonder what she meant to do with it. I really, really am curious to know what she meant to do with it, how she was going to fill in the rest. Were there going to be more alphabets? Was there going to be a verse or a saying? Were there going to be more random motifs? What were this couple? Who were they going to be? A king and a queen, or I don't know, an Adam and Eve? Although she's a bit too dressed, I think, for that probably. Yeah, it's so intriguing, isn't it? I love the colours that we've got, these sort of blues and creams and browns. But again, I'd love to know what her original colourway were. I imagine much more sort of greens and creams and pinks probably and reds. And again, looking on the back of that, you can't really tell. This has obviously never been framed. It's all faded pretty much equally on the front as the back. But it's beautifully, neatly done. Yeah, so there we go. So this one, I feel like part of me kind of wants to stitch on it. I know some people will be horrified by that. I kind of want to though. I really do. I don't really want to chart all this up. I mean, I might chart some of the little motifs, I suppose. But I kind of want to do something with it. I just don't want to leave it as a sad, unfinished work in progress for all eternity. I'd like it to become something. And I haven't yet worked out what that will be. but I want it to be something that, you know, gives due respect to whoever it was who first stitched this, and her, I'm going to assume her aims for it, and her sort of aesthetic and values, but also something that adds to it, that isn't afraid to say, let's take what she's done and make something new and different from that. I love that idea of it being a collaborative artwork. Anyway, this is not sort of anywhere near the top of my list of things to do at the moment, but it is a project for one day. So those are the 4 older samplers I have. I do have another sampler and I don't know where it is. About 10 years ago, 15 years ago, I sewed a sampler. I've only ever sewn one, but I did sew one, and I have it, and it is framed, and I do not know where it is. It's obviously not currently on a wall. I looked in the place, I thought it was in the same place as Mary Baigent, but obviously it wasn't. So now I'm not quite sure where else to look. I'm sure I've not given it away. I'm sure I've not done anything with it. It will turn up, and one day when it does, I'll show it to you. But in the meantime, I hope you enjoyed looking at that small collection of samplers that I own. I'll try and put some more information about them all. But do feel free to ask me any questions that you have about them, or if you've got older samplers and you'd like to find out a bit more about them, let me know. And it would just be really interesting to see what everyone's got. Thank you so much for watching. Do let me know if you enjoyed this kind of video. I will be back next time with a normal craft tube. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you then.